All right. Good morning, Corporations Committee. Welcome back to day two. Do we need to call the attendance again on day two of a meeting?
Your choice, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, let's get, in the organization development world, if everybody talks at least once during a meeting, they're more likely to talk. So let's call roll again. Go ahead.
Senator Boner. Senator Case. Senator Nethercott. Senator Scott. Representative Blackburn. Representative Clausen. Representative Clifford.
Here.
Representative Duncan. Representative Ayer.
Here.
Representative Hunt. Representative McGuire.
Excused.
Representative Roscoe. Co-chairman Driscoll.
Here.
And co-chairman Zwonitzer.
Here.
Mr.
Thank-
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Talbot. First up committee, you'll remember from yesterday, we ran a little bit long, so the insurance commissioner was nice enough to delay until this morning, so thank you. I know hopefully we didn't take your afternoon out yesterday, but welcome to corporations, and I believe we can probably get through insurance in about 30 minutes. But welcome, as you know, you're on our interim committee or interim topic list for one official draft legislation, then maybe some update on that, is it producer lines possibility up in Northwest Wyoming? Is that the other issue that was coming before us, Commissioner Rude?
Mr. Chairman, we're doing some updates to licensing here today with regards to what is in what are we talking about? Perhaps reinsurance?
Reinsurance.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. An update on that as well.
So, Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Jeff Rude, the insurance commissioner. With me is Brian Stevens. He's been with our office for about a year now as the licensing supervisor. And when I'm done chatting, he'll walk you through the proposed updates of the licensing statute changes we propose, looking to modify some things, update them, and create some efficiencies. With regard to reinsurance, we were before the blockchain task force. And we've been working with a group of industry folks to come up with designing a reinsurance model with the hopes of bringing it here to Wyoming where they domesticate here. I think we're finding out as we go there that that's one avenue we're still going to go down. And we've met with them maybe 6-8 times, and we're coming together with a model we hope to present to the blockchain task force in September in Laramie. And parallel to that is we're looking at a insurance sandbox for innovations, and we'll see what comes with that. I'm in the process of contacting various National Association of Insurance Commissioner members, other states basically, who have a similar sandbox, and seeing what their experience has been. And so I think we're going down those parallel tracks at this point. I'm fairly hopeful that we'll come up with something for reinsurance. I have no doubt about that. I can't really predict anything when it comes to the insurance sandbox, just because the other states haven't had a whole lot of takers yet, but we'll certainly go down that road. So unless there's any questions on that, Mr. Chairman or committee members, I'll pass it over to Mr. Stevens to talk about our updates.
Okay, seeing no questions. Senator Scott, you do. Go ahead.
Normally, this committee handles insurance matters as opposed to the blockchain task force. Do they now have independent authority to bring a bill, or how's that going to play out?
It is my understanding that was it digital, whatever their new name is, of the blockchain task force does have independent authority to submit legislation. The two bills that I know overlap with our committee, I have discussed with the chairman that they should at least check with us at our November meeting, make sure that we are also comfortable with the legislation. And then depending where it gets sent, if it gets through their task force to our committee, that we will get to review it before it hits the floor. But yes, we have expanded the authority and scope of, I can't remember what it's even called now, Digital Privacy and Innovation Task Force over the last year.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott?
I would hope that this committee at some point, we could always do it during session, it'd be harder in a budget session, was subject to anything in this area to considerable scrutiny. I don't know how much expertise the blockchain task force has in insurance. They've done some things in the past that don't increase my confidence in them in that area.
I think if they need a 2/3 threshold for introduction, they're going to want to get all the support they can get and come let our committee hear what they've been doing was, I think, my referral to their chairman. So I look forward to them visiting us in our November meeting and the insurance commissioner at that point again. Any other questions for the insurance commissioner? Seeing none, Mr. Stevens, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. What we've got before you here is some modernization to the producer licensing statutes in 26.9. We do have a handout for you that you should have there. The first thing we're modernizing is updating some producer licensing fees. As far as producers go, it has always been that, well, for several years, it has been that non-resident producers are charged $150 for their license, $150 for renewal. But when we get to adjusters, consultants, and surplus lines brokers, it appears that there was a typo. It looks like the intention was for non-residents to have 150, residents to have 100, but the initial application fee for everyone is 100 at this point. So what we've done here is taken surplus lines brokers, adjusters, and consultants and matched that with insurance producers so that non-residents from initial application and for continuance is 150 for their licensing fees. Getting over to page 3, we are also adding some fees to continuing education. Wyoming is one of the few states that does not charge continuing education providers. We put the full burden on the producers. We are looking to modernize that and shift the burden from the producers to the continuing education providers because the continuing education providers cause most of the work in regards to continuing education. Getting to page 4, updating the purpose and scope of the licensing standards. We are making sure that surplus lines brokers are held to the same standards as any other producers as far as the military service and long-term disability exceptions, which allow for extensions for licensing if they are disabled or being recalled from military service, updating address change requirements, which they are required to do within 30 days, and reporting of actions. If any other state has taken actions, they need to report that to us within 30 days. Getting to page 6, we did not have continuing education provider defined anywhere. So we have gone with other states and the NAIC to define the continuing education provider so that we are able to lay out these changes. We are also defining public adjuster. It was listed in statute and in rule before, but we did not have it defined. And on to page 7, we are defining licensee so that we can clean up the language a bit. Right now in the statute, it says individual insurance producer, adjuster, or surplus lines broker. We are listing it as licensee to encompass everyone that's licensed under 26.9. On to page 8, those licensee definitions are replacing individual insurance producer, adjuster, or surplus lines broker in paragraph B, C, and D. And on page 9 in paragraph F, we are adding email address as that is the principal form of communication we have with all of our licensees now. Page 10 is just adding licensee. Page 11, we are removing the requirement for display of licenses. We're doing this because the only way to really assure that somebody has a license and that it's not expired is to call the department or look through the producer database to make sure that the licenses are updated. We are strictly using email for licensing now, so they are digital copies. And since we're no longer sending out paper copies, we don't feel that it is appropriate to require people to display them. Page 12 is our continuing education statute. This is probably the biggest change that we're making. This is shifting that burden over from the producers to the continuing education providers. We're basically saying that the continuing education providers need to apply to be approved as providers in the state of Wyoming. That approval will run for every 2 years on which they need to renew it. The approval will be $100 for the initial application, $100 for the renewal. We are also saying that a course has a fee associated with it. They will apply for the course. It's a $50 application fee and a $50 renewal every 2 years. In paragraph 3 there, starting with once granted approval, we will clean up the language there a little bit. The intent is to make sure that those renewals happen at the last day of the month. Right now, it's not worded quite correctly, so we're going to clean that up just a bit. And then on the additional page that we included, in a conversation with our vendor, they brought to our attention 269232, which is the return of the license to the commissioner. Again, since we are no longer sending out licenses, there's really nothing to return. They're tracked digitally, and we feel that this statute is no longer necessary.
Ready for some questions then, Mr. Stevens? Can you talk a little bit about the fees for classes? So not only are we going to have continuing education providers pay a fee every 2 years for every course they issue or provide, it's $50, and maybe just explain a little bit more about what these courses are, how they work, the time, is it a 3 hour, is it a 1-day class? Some more information, and if other states charge by the course.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, thank you for the question. Most states do charge for the course. We're right in line with what other states charge. Right now, we're not doing it based on credit hours, we're basing it on course. So whether it's a 24-hour class or a 1-hour class, they are all the same rates. We're doing it that way because we're hoping it'll clean up some of the data. Right now, we don't charge for courses. There are some that have been renewed that nobody has taken in the last 5 years. And we realize that we need to clean up some of our data, and this will help with that.
Okay, that was my only major question. Committee, questions, concerns? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, these fees that the insurance department charges, first, my understanding is they're all deposited in the general fund. Is that correct?
Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, yes, that is correct.
Mr. Chairman, what in any given year or biennium specify which is the magnitude of what we're collecting, depositing in the general fund?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott's, by moving this fee schedule over to the providers rather than the producers, it is going to be approximately the same amount. So it's going to cause no change.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott, third time's
that
charm.
wasn't the question. How much is it?
I apologize, Senator Scott. Mr. Chairman, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I can get them to you.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott.
I think we would be wise to see those numbers before we did anything substantive here. I would hope that next time we could get them with some kind of a breakdown by relevant categories. Mr. Chairman, I think many people will be surprised at the extent to which we are taxing the insurance business and extent to which it's supporting us. And then the question will be, is this bill really, they're talking about, is this just some technical corrections? Or is it potentially a revenue raiser that would then have to originate in the House?
I always appreciate getting more work. And so again, committee, the question before you today, although the Insurance Commission has done quite a bit of work on identifying the statutes, would be to make this a draft bill for consideration at a subsequent meeting with all the changes already placed in official LSO formatting. Other questions for Mr. Stevens or the Insurance Commissioner?
Mr.
None.
Chairman,
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I do hope that when you give us figures and how much, and what category, you will then show the effect of what you're proposing in this, in terms of if there is an effect, in terms of the total revenue.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, that is our intention, yes.
And I'm sure you have that feedback and have an expectation of our next meeting, what you'll be asked and what other information you provide.
Absolutely.
All right. Another one, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, you are pretty strictly doing business with these people on the internet these days. Are you experiencing any difficulties with that? It strikes me that in the urban areas where many insurance people would have their offices, or almost all of them would, that access to the internet is universally available in Wyoming, but that's not true in the rural areas. Do you encounter any individuals that are trying to operate strictly from home that you're licensing and that might have difficulties, or has there been no problems with that?
Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, very rarely do we encounter somebody that does not have online access. The majority of the industry of insurance is conducted through online spaces. So it is a reasonable expectation that these folks have access to email and to the internet.
Another one, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, since you said very rarely, what do you do when you do encounter somebody that has a problem?
Good luck, Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, we do still accept phone calls from these producers. We will mail out a license if they request it. We just want to make sure that's the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I think we can safely assume that almost everybody will, because almost everybody will have some kind of office arrangement in an area that does have access.
Agreed. Any other questions, committee, for the insurance commissioner, Mr. Stevens? Not seeing any currently. Let me see if there's any public comment on the rough draft before us. Not seeing any online. Committee, I'm looking for a motion to move to a bill draft for consideration our next meeting. Moved by Representative Ayer. Seconded by Representative Duncan. Any other discussion, committee? Seeing none and question being called, I think I can just do a voice vote. All in favor of having a draft for our next meeting? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That motion is passed. Any other questions for the insurance commissioner on anything insurance related while we have him this morning? Not seeing any. So thank you again for holding over till Tuesday morning. Certainly appreciate seeing you and look forward at an upcoming meeting of seeing you both again. And with that, committee, we are up to our discussion on special districts, something near and dear to many of us. And I know.
My first failure.
And I know we do have some municipal special district people who aren't here yet, who are driving down from Casper this morning. So I think I'm going to move to creative districts first, if that's okay with the committee. You'll remember from management council's directives that we have the possibility of looking of community development districts, creative districts, tourism districts, and any other type of special district that may be needed inside a municipality or a county to help with revenue raising purposes. So we have 3 on the agenda. If it's okay with the committee, we'll start with creative districts. I know Mr. Lang, as a state employee, if you want to kick off the discussion on perhaps what a creative district is or could be and how they would work and the necessity here in Wyoming of why we should pursue them.
Happy to jump in. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Michael Lang. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Arts Council, which is the state agency that helps support arts and culture across the state of Wyoming. The arts and cultural industry makes up has about 11,500 employees working full-time in that area. It's about 4.2% of the state's workforce. So quite a bit of people living and working in Wyoming, helping support arts and culture. So specifically about cultural districts, there's about, first I should say, in your materials, there is a policy document from the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, which is the association that helps support the different state arts agencies around the state, like the Wyoming Arts Council. In that agency, it outlines how many arts and cultural districts are set up across the country. As you'll note, there's about 20 states that have arts and cultural districts, and they serve in many different functions and in many different capacities. There's a handful of reasons that these districts exist. One is to help support the arts and cultural industry and help drive economic and community development through the arts. Sometimes that's done through taxation, sometimes it's done through funding, sometimes it's done through supportive professional development for communities, and sometimes it's done through marketing and promotion. So those are many of the key reasons that states have arts and cultural districts across the country. And I would be happy to stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions so far? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I think the question here is going to be, how are these going to be financed? And I know in our community, we've got quite a number of private organizations that are operating quite successfully and supported by the community. I'm thinking of the Wyoming Symphony Orchestra. I'm thinking of the fiddle contest that is a regional contest sponsored in Casper every year. Didn't happen last year because of the COVID, but that has been revived and has been doing better in recent years. The Nicolason Art Museum and the 321, they all seem to be doing well with combination of private donor support and fundraising activities and direct sales of their services. How do you envision changing the system from that? Are you talking about some kind of a tax district to supplement the private funding? I'm
Yeah.
unclear.
Mr. Chairman, Senator
Mr.
Scott,
Lang.
thank you very much. And I do want to preface that I believe there's a handful of organizations that are set to give testimony today that have brought this forward to the committee to discuss. But I think the concept is there's a handful of different ways that it could help support. So as we look at how do we help diversify our economy, if we were to help support the marketing and promotion of these cultural activities that you're talking about in the state to help drive tourism, to help drive sales in the state, I think there's a lot of opportunities in that, and it could be set up as a taxable district. Many states are not set up as a taxable district, are a program that is ran by their state agency that then helps provide support to those tax districts. So the concept is, how do you take all of those groups you just listed, and how do you help promote the cultural sector as a whole together, so that those individual organizations are not on their own just trying to market and promote themselves.
And that kind of helped, but I know Senator Scott's gonna have a follow-up on it. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I do have, and this is not independent of this particular cultural one. I think in general, we're going to more and more special districts with taxing authority and have the risk of gradually transforming ourselves into a much higher property tax state as a consequence. I think in my community, for example, county fire protection used to be done through the county commissioners, through the county mill levy. They created a special fire district, which is not been subject to a lot of public control. You got the weed and pest district, some of those other things. We're seeing more and more, some of them have been around quite a while, more and more special districts with consequent higher tax rates. And I think fundamentally, we have a question as the legislature as to how far we want to go in that direction, because we are gradually transforming ourselves into a much higher tax area.
Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Ling?
Happy to take any questions. Sure.
Good save. Questions, Mr. Lang, and the Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Link, do we have any, I know we don't necessarily have any districts necessarily currently, but do we have any pockets or districts, not taxable districts, but do we have any districts or pockets currently that could fall into something like what we're trying to create here across the state?
Mr. Lang.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, it's a great question. So there is a museum district across the state that does have a tax attached to it. So that's one example. And I think the other big example that really I think plays well in Wyoming and makes a lot of sense is kind of the Main Street, the Main Street organization, how Main Street districts are set up, are a structure that is very similar to how cultural districts are set up in many other states.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, my question is more along the lines of, are there pockets of areas throughout our state that are, do we have artistic districts, you know, where there's a lot of stores that are all galleries and such? Or do we have, I don't know, different kinds of areas already established that would be considered a cultural district without, so that those lines could already be drawn, I guess is my question.
Mr. Lang, if you know, or.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, Representative, I think it's a great question. And I think if you were looking at a taxable district in Wyoming, for instance, just as one example, you'd want to use a broad district, a larger district, so there'd be a larger population, a larger geographic reach that would help support arts and culture in that area. If you're looking at a several block radius inside of a community, for instance, as a cultural district, I believe many of what we would consider cultural districts across the state of Wyoming would mirror what are Main Street districts across the state. I feel like maybe I'm not getting to your question.
I think you're looking for types of taxation districts. So we have resort districts, which are kind of cultural. We have museum districts. I think there are 3. We have downtown development authorities, which are supposed to encourage business.
I'm just seeing some
But-
pushback if we just do Main Street.
And we actually have recreational tax districts. So recreation is not necessarily cultural. I mean, we have lodging tax boards that you're supposed to attract people to the community that are, but nothing that I would argue, and Mr. Lang, if you would agree or not, that quite hits what we would consider cultural districts. Besides museums are about the closest in my mind that we get, but those are really to help push usually 1 or 2 entities for historic purposes, but not to engage in other types of artistic means. And so would I be correct?
Chairman, I
There's
think
nothing
that's
specific that we have right now that other states do that would be a creative district in Wyoming that other states are moving into.
Chairman, I think that's a great synopsis of it, yes.
Other questions, Representative Roscoe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, I think I have a question here. Is there any way that these districts could be tied into, funding for tourism? Because when I was thinking about it this morning, the public art around our country, Mount Rushmore, Statue of Liberty, the St. Louis Arch, bring in a lot of tourism money. And I was just wondering if there's any connection there. I think that's a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lang?
Chairman, Representative, I think it's a great point. Arts and culture are one of the strongest ties to drive tourism to communities. Arts and Prosperity 5, a recent study by the Americans for the Arts showed that someone traveling for the arts will spend double as someone traveling for another reason. They'll spend more in a community. They'll stay an extra night. They'll pay extra fees. They'll go to an event. They'll eat out at restaurants. Arts and culture help drive tourism across our country, like you just mentioned. And there's no reason that Wyoming could make a significant impact or a significant initiative to help push that across our state.
Other questions on cultural or creative arts districts broadly? I know there is information in your packet that talks about what other states are doing and where we could pursue at a statewide level or something more local. My question is, if we did have creative arts districts at a statewide level, that other states, that the information you passed out, you would assume the Arts Council would be the best place to be the mover and shaker, go between kind of over umbrella over these creative districts that were Wyoming. Is that the best fit in your mind?
Mr. Chairman, if we were to set up a statewide program that was not just pushing authority to counties or to county commissioners, it probably would make sense that a state, I should say, many states are set up where their state arts agency serves in that capacity. And then there'd be just questions around support of that program. How do we help with staffing and what funding goes out to help support that program?
Okay, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if we did a statewide program on a county or city level, how would that work? So would my county or my city level decide what locations would that be? Would they draw the boundaries?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, great question. So many states work a lot differently. Some states just have a set of eligibility or criteria, and then local communities or even local nonprofit organizations together collaboratively can submit to the state arts agency in many situations to review that information and then see if they meet that criteria. It could be set up on a county situation. It could be set up by like a local government had to submit the application. So I think there's many different ways you could go about setting up a cultural district.
Further questions? Representative Clausen, you have a museum district in your district, correct? From Glen Rock?
Probably. Mr. Chairman, my question is, I have a friend that's a major bronze artist, and most of his work goes to places where the zoning actually takes care of the artwork. Is this something you guys have pursued, is allowing basically in the new subdivisions of the zoning to be used to, qualify their require so much art and then not need a bureaucracy to take care of it and simply do it through some of a regulatory system?
Mr. Lang?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I am not aware of that specific structure for a setup of helping support arts and culture. I think that the concept of the cultural district would be that an individual like your friend who's working in the creative district would be able to, the concept would be the district would help support the work that he or she is doing and help marketing and promoting that work across the state.
So maybe if I could add on to that question, I think Representative Clausen is referring to the general requirement for public art. With subdivisions, new buildings, we have some statutes in place that you need to have artwork. But perhaps you could expand on what, in your mind, a creative district would be above and beyond possibly what public art would be a component. But I would assume a creative district would be a little more than an art in a park district. And what other avenues in your mind would a creative district encompass?
Yeah, you bet. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I think, I think the concept for one would be, it would help individuals who are working in this sector. So it would help drive economic growth to those that are creating art. It would help drive tourism and public good for people who could take part in cultural activities, if it be concerts and festivals and fairs inside of their local area. And it would really help drive tourism, like we've talked about. And that would, of course, help help communities thrive.
Further questions from Mr. Lang? Not seeing at this time. Thank you much.
Great, thank you very much.
We'll start taking some public comment. We do have someone already in the room, Mr. Sesser from, I believe, Natrona County. Welcome, Tyler. Floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you can.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on this. I think I'm wearing two hats today. One is Art 321 and looking at how, Art 321 is sitting inside Casper. And we do, some of our development and our building is really been dependent on kind of economic development measures like the old Yellowstone district or the DDA. And the idea of a cultural district that could be kind of allocated specifically to arts organizations and things, not just within economic development, but thinking about things like youth incarceration reduction or substance abuse treatment programs. We just brought in two folks about 2 weekends ago, one who's created a program that's reduced youth recidivism in Iowa from 40% to 20% through trained artists. Artist mentors, and another one that increased retention in substance abuse treatment programs from 30 to 70%. The national average is 30%. And that was also through like kind of trained artists. So when we're thinking about the impact that a cultural district could have, yes, number one, it's to add to the creative economy, add to the businesses that are going on in our community. Like we do our art walks. We had Branding Iron is a local burger shop in town that did a whole display of a photographer. And between the two of them, they recruited more folks into that business to buy the art, but also buy the burgers. And without this kind of measure or something similar, we're basically beholden to available grants at a state level, available foundation dollars, and contributions from donors. But a creative district is that kind of in and out that we can see as a nice cycle. But then we can also say that holistic approach of like, yeah, we want to create a healthier, happier, more culturally vibrant community. And that is another place that arts plays in. To Representative Duncan's question too, there's not currently a tax setup like that, but in my other hat with the Wyoming Engage Council, this is one of those things that we're looking at that it could be a great revenue driver at a county level. And I know my colleague Amber Pollock on the Casper City Council is like keen on like figuring out ways that local city council can find ways to allocate that money and generate its own revenue. So I love the concept, I love the idea, and I hope that that funding stays in the hands of of that creative district. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. One question I have, Mr. Sesser, when you say apply to the state for some funds or grants, give me an idea of where those are housed. We have the Cultural Trust Fund. We probably have some Arts Council grants. Maybe
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Council, where else would you go to?
So we've found success in going to Humanities Council, the three that you named. Sometimes we've gone to the Business Council for support. And that's really about it for us at a state level. Tourism, we have a great partnership with Casper Tourism this year, working on a documentary about 6 Casper artists. But as many of you know, the kind of flexible funding for them is pretty limited as compared to like surrounding states. So we really try to partner with them and then fundraise on the outside. Like for that partnership, we brought in a donor that contributed half of the funding needed for the documentary. But yes, so that's about the options that we have.
And any other local or county sources you go to on a regular basis or could apply for creative or cultural endeavors outside of your local lodging tax board partnership?
I mean, some, as Mr. Lang put forward, the Main Street programs, we don't have one in Casper. And the DDA is particularly limited on funding. So we have not found success in kind of joint funding efforts through organizations like that. But I would say that the ones that we end up relying most heavily on are different foundations like the Wyoming Community Foundation. But locally, yeah, I'm not in a, kind of that higher dollar amount project that we would need for something like a youth, an at-risk youth arts program, or a, partnership with like Club 1224, which does huge work for substance recovery.
Further questions, committee? Not seeing any for you, Tyler. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you all.
Mayor Hall, I saw you jump into the room. We're on cultural or creative districts, depending what state you're in.
A second. Oh. Okay.
The
Am
floor
I
is yours.
on?
You're on.
All right, thank you. Let's see. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and Corporations Committee for letting me speak on this issue today. I took a look at the agenda. It seems like there's a lot to discuss here as far as with special districts, and I certainly agree with some of the speakers as far as trying to do things to create some economic development drivers to our municipalities. In fact, just a little on the topic of the arts in my community, we have a Cody Public Arts Committee that I've basically created at the city council level, and we kind of just go around and help set up private partnerships and get some through sponsorships and grants to try and fund things to enhance the arts within our community. Utilize the model they have in the city of Sheridan to try and promote some arts in the downtown community, working with other artists. And so I found that to be pretty effective as far as cultivating kind of an art scene within our town. I got ahead of myself. I'm Matt Hall, the president of the Wyoming Association of Municipalities and mayor of the city of Cody. And then just to talk a little bit about the special district aspects on, at least as a representative for the association. The special improvement districts, WAM, our members stand, of course, willing to discuss and work with the legislature and affected parties to solve these issues around these certain types of special district entities. We are a little cautious about giving blanket support for the creation of a special district until we, of course, understand the specifics of that given district and how it would impact our members economically, politically, and socially. We do want to point out that, as Mr. Lang and I think Representative Duncan were touching on, that the legislature has created vehicles and statutes that allow many of these activities to be accomplished, vis-a-vis the LIDs, the local improvement districts, the URAs, urban renewal authorities, and DDAs, the downtown development authorities, have powers to raise funds and contract with developments to make improvements. We feel like if there are additional tools that are needed to solve these specific problems, WAM would ask the legislature to first look to enhance the powers of the governing bodies of these cities, towns, and counties to address these problems before creating a whole new governmental entity. That being said, we're always welcome to and enjoy working with the legislature and partners throughout the state to enhance the quality of life of our citizens within our municipalities. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Well, I would say the legislature likes working with WAM as well. I do have a question. Do you know if we have any urban renewal entities or projects going on? There's something in statute from the 70s about it, but I wasn't aware that we have any urban renewal programs or districts currently in place.
Mr. Chairman, I did not reach out to our association to kind of see if there were any, so I cannot say that I know of any. My associate in the crowd there, Bob McLaurin, is there. Bob might be able to fill in or answer that question, but I don't know any off the top of my head. per se.
Other questions for Mayor Hall? Representative Roscoe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Hall. Would these state cultural districts have to go through all the same procedures? What I think they have to do is they have to be approved by the county commissioners. Is that correct? Before they're formed, and which would just allow each county to make their choice on something like this?
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, Mayor, if you could explain how special districts, I don't know if there's any at a city level that you approve, but if you have any.
Mr. Chairman, that is accurate. I don't have any at the city level. It's my knowledge that Representative Roscoe is probably accurate, that that's something that kind of comes through the county commissioners. One of the items that always pops into my head are the cemetery districts. I know that Park County has one, and they receive X amount of mills for funding. And so I think that's somewhat of what you're alluding to.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, just to weigh in a little bit, it's kind of all off the maps. The county commissioners have various levels of authorities over some districts. Some districts, they appoint the members and approve the budget. But most districts, I would say, are sort of independent of the county commissioners. We had a special districts task force a few years ago. We brought a bill that was successful, that increased the scrutiny of the county commissioners over special districts, in the sense that there was at least a collaboration on the budget, a public meeting on the budget. But it's really all off the map. Sort of, I think there's been a feeling among some in the legislature to try to increase the amount of participation by counties, county commissioners with respect to special districts, in part because there's a constitutional requirement about mill levies, both at the county level and at the city level. And do special districts exist to get around those constitutional limitations on funding or not? And so anyway, there's a lot of blood and guts, gore on the special districts hill that we've been through for a long, long time. But suffice to say, they're off the map. Not all special districts are mill levy based. Some are assessment based. Some group of special districts actually, in terms of irrigation, are within the purview of the courts, not even in the purview of the executive branch. So it's kind of a big, big area. Best I can do.
I'm sure you would agree, Mr. Hall, Mayor Hall.
Yes, Mr.
Any
Chairman.
other questions for Mayor Hall? And potentially Wham, but as he said, Mr. McLaurin's also in the room. All right, seeing none. Thank you very much. Mayor, always a pleasure, and we'll probably be hearing from you here again on some other special districts coming forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not seeing anyone else in the room on creative districts. People in the audience, Ms. Taylor, welcome to corporations.
Good morning. Good morning, members of the committee. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Erin Taylor, and I'm here today representing the Wyoming Arts Alliance. It's many of those organizations that you heard about earlier from Mr. Lang, that your arts organizations in your communities across the state, and those who advocate for arts and culture across the state of Wyoming. I wanted to share a little bit with you today. This is a concept that the Board of Directors for the Wyoming Arts Alliance does support, and as one option, another tool in the toolbox. And I think that's a way that I would ask you to think about this idea, even though all the conversation that we've heard today, I don't think we have a solid what is it yet, or what could it be in Wyoming yet. I think we would ask that you continue to explore what this could be as a tool for local communities to utilize, to build their communities into ones that we like to say are livable communities. You know, communities aren't just about water and sewer and jobs. They're about what makes it a great place to live and what it attracts, how those communities can attract other businesses and other community members to come and live and really stay there, bring their families and build our workforce, build our communities. So that's something that I'd ask you to consider is think outside the box a little bit, maybe allow this to move forward and look at how some other states do it, or what we have in Wyoming currently. How could we, bring some of these ideas together? It seems like we're nibbling around the edge on some of them. But like you heard from Senator Case, special districts have been tough over the years, and how they're formed, how they're governed, all of those things are really important things to consider. I wanted to let you know that in terms of the Wyoming Arts Alliance, as I mentioned, this is a tool in the toolbox that we are thinking about. We are also trying to get together the other interests in this community to really think big picture in terms of sustainability for funding in this area. We're talking about folks like the Cultural Trust Fund and the Humanities Council and the Arts Council, and anyone else who would be interested in getting everyone together, kind of a big think tank exercise to look at what else is sustainable. So this is one tool. And I think you're hearing from others across the state that communities are wanting something like this. And so I'd encourage you to move something forward. I'm not sure exactly what it looks like, but I think we can work together to find a space that might work for Wyoming. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. And for those of you not aware, Ms. Taylor used to be the executive director of the Taxpayers Association a while back, but certainly understand special districts. I think my question overall is, in as much as anyone up here, you are aware of the current kind of legislative makeup and thinking and tax issues, special district issues going forward. And so as I'm contemplating how this could work, in my mind, it would likely be much easier to expand the authority of an existing special district, say museum district. Instead of calling them museum districts, call them creative districts and give them more authority. Or we have recreation districts that charge up to, I think, allowed 2 mills. And I think only one county right now is actually doing their second. And so taking an existing special district and shuffling it. So I guess my question is, thoughts on that, if you think that might be an easier way to go, is the expansion of a current special district, or any thoughts in reviewing what other states have done or what Wyoming could do? Any more specifics you have on an avenue forward through the current legislature on what you think might work? I think we all agree there's a need. We're all just kind of looking for the right path.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you sharing my history. I don't know if everyone here knows that. Sometimes bringing something new is hard, and it's tough to wrap our heads around what that means, and it's really hard to explain and sell that to your voters, to your constituents, to our community members. In Wyoming, we do have some structure. We've mentioned museum districts. There's some other districts that you'll discuss after this. To me, what seems maybe easiest is I don't know, rebranding, if that's a way to say it, expanding authority around something that you already have. That seems to be an easy place to start. You're not reinventing the wheel. There is some history with what that could look like, what everyone is familiar with, what it is in their communities, or if you have one, if you have that sort of a district. So I would look to what we have here in Wyoming. I would look for synergies. I would look for ways to build upon ideas. I don't know if all of these ideas have to be mutually exclusive from each other. And so, Mr. Chairman, that would be my recommendation. I hope that's helpful.
Certainly. Further questions for Ms. Taylor? Seeing none, thank you very much, Aaron. Other people here on creative districts, welcome. Mr. Lindstrom. Floor is yours, Mr. Bill.
Members of the committee, I just have some remarks, if I could add to it a little bit, this discussion that's important to, of course, the future of the state. My name is Bill Lindstrom. I'm Executive Director of Arts Cheyenne, which is the local cultural organization that promotes and advocates and programs arts activities in the community, as well as helps manage public art in the county, as well as the community. In my brief remarks this morning, I'm going to draw on a career that's been spent in community development, understanding what communities are made of, their cultural environments, and the understanding about how to project that back to the residents who live there, as well as the people who want to visit there. And I think that's at the heart of our conversation this morning, is making communities more livable and making them attractive to people who want to live there, or again, who already live there. Recently, we convened an informal working group of community-based cultural representatives like Art Cheyenne, with a broad perspective of who they are, who they currently represent, and the type of things that represent the activities that take place in those communities that are worth supporting and worth reinvesting in. Members of this working group have included economic and community developers, cultural organizations, and representatives as well in the legislature that, again, have that broad perspective. And so it was a broad-based, well-informed group of people who felt that creative districts need to be given a large-scale area, and we're glad to see that this committee is taking that forward. To re-paraphrase the handout that came attached to this document, and that Mr. Lang, of course, referenced, of course, the other states that have created cultural districts that are based on the idea that there are community development tools, there's standard settings, there's guidelines that can help define communities in this area. It's something, again, that we spent quite a bit of time understanding how that could perhaps port to a state like Wyoming with its variety of urban and rural settings. We believe that the idea of creative districts and the state level standards-based strategic level thinking, combined with the tactical level, the local community thinking, is at the core of our conversation and is the reason to consider a creative district type of environment. We believe that Wyoming's existing special purpose district is the perfect environment and is the logical environment for development districts based on creativity, culture, tourism, general community improvement, whatever the local community deems important to improve citizen-driven development of its people and its resources, which of course means jobs and new businesses, and certainly visitation. Our existing special museum districts, again, are a perfect example of that local recognition of a cultural resource. And of course, we have those museum districts in Crook County, Weston County, the Meeteetse Museums, the Little Snake River District. All of those are important representations and examples of that local will to protect that local resource and that cultural resource. So the working group that, again, I'm involved with believes in the strength of the special purpose district system is because, and the strength of that is that it requires buy-in. It requires local referendums. It requires mission setting at the local level, combined with, of course, strategic level thinking from the state, the Wyoming Arts Council, the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, non-governmental entities like the Wyoming Arts Alliance, the Wyoming Humanities Council, the entire spectrum, of course, of people who are thinking about it. So we are, again, glad that you're taking up this conversation and that everyone here seems to be interested in seeing it move forward as well. So on behalf of Art Cheyenne and the working group, we're pleased that you're moving this forward. We also understand the complexities, as well as you do, of special purpose districts. And so we offer our assistance in helping navigate what might be the best product to develop. And I stand for questions if you have any. But again, I appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Lindstrom? Senator Scott?
Mr. Chair, first, just a general comment that I think this is legitimately part of our economic development effort, because you can get all the business things right, and we're in competition with other communities that can do the same sort of thing. And if you don't have an attractive place for people to live, you can find that you have the people who want to bring the business here, but they can't get the staff because the staff would rather live somewhere else that has some of these amenities we're talking about. So I think it is important, Mr. Chairman, to understand that this is an integral part of our economic development efforts, diversity efforts. At the same time, I'm trying to get my heads around specific concepts and see how they'll work and what they'll actually do, as opposed to a number of the voluntary efforts that we do see in our communities. The specific question I have, in part trying to judge, is I'm not familiar with this end of Cheyenne. What does Arts Cheyenne do? What's your actual experience in this area?
Sure, Mr. Lindstrom, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, Arts Cheyenne is classified as a local arts agency, local cultural agency. And it's defined as that community-wide organization that understands as best it can the local arts and cultural spectrum, finds ways to promote it, finds ways to enhance it, certainly finds ways to advocate for its improvement. And so while we may not do the on the ground programming that a lot of other organizations do, such as performance organizations, organizations that are of course involved in creating art, we absolutely support its existence and we support its enhancements in any way we possibly can. We do happen to have, just because by virtue of the way this organization is structured through an MOU with the city of Cheyenne, responsibilities to install and manage public art that we are able to influence in an existing manner, as well as new art that we have planned. And so public art is a part of our domain, as it is in many arts organizations across the state.
Senator Scott, follow up.
Are you a private nonprofit organization? Are you a governmental agency? I'm just unclear and wondering what kind of a model you are for the rest of the state.
Right.
Mr.
Mr.
Lindstrom.
Chairman, Senator Scott, thanks again for the question. And I'm sorry, I left that out. We were a 501c3 nonprofit organization.
Further questions? Mr. Lindstrom, seeing none. Thank you very much for being
Thank
here. Further public comment on creative arts districts? Mr. Riemann, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of Wyoming's County Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss special districts. I'll keep my comments actually more broader than just cultural districts, as these would apply to any of the special districts that you might be considering. I think it's fair to say that if you asked my members about special districts, you'd get a lot of frustration from them and perhaps not a lot of interest in moving any of the concepts forward. That said, my members also understand that there are important services that can't necessarily be provided within the limitations that exist at the county level, including the 12 county mill. And so we have been supportive of certain special districts in the past and do today. One of those that we're interested in continuing the conversation with you is around airport districts, which were considered last year. And another one that is becoming more pressing for my members, although I don't have any true definition for you today about what we would specifically request, is ambulance services. There are provisions in the special district statutes that do allow for ambulance services, but we've run into some issues in a number of the counties that you represent. And I'm trying to get a better handle on that so that I can bring that information forward to you. I did want to just provide some information in terms of the role of county commissioners and frankly, more broadly, counties and other elected officials in that conversation. There are dozens of different forms of special districts that can be established in the state of Wyoming, and Senator Case did a good job of giving a high-level overview. And back in 2016, your staff did a great job of producing several reports around this particular issue. One of the documents, which I'm happy to forward to you after this conversation, is an 8-page document that goes through and outlines in a spreadsheet form what are the requirements for establishment of a special district, who has the power Do you have elected officials? Do you have appointed officials? What is the taxing authority? What role do county commissioners have in that? And so on and so forth. And I think that's important for you. By my count, there are currently over 700 special districts across this state, which have responsibility for over $1 billion in tax revenue every year, which is often a point of consternation for you and as well my members. When a special district acts contrary to the wishes of the members of that special district, certainly they'll go to that special district on occasion, but a lot of times they're coming to my members with their frustrations. And let's be honest, my members don't necessarily have all of the power. County commissioners do derive some of their power over special districts through their ability to levy the taxes. And in most cases, a special district is responsible for submitting its budget to the commissioners, who then assess the district mill levy. But that doesn't mean that the commissioners have veto authority over that. Oftentimes it's a pass-through in terms of that conversation. In some cases, they can adjust the mill levy. In other cases, commissioners must assess the amount certified by the special district. LSO did provide an analysis back in 2016 around this issue, and in some instances, it appears that commissioners can reduce the assessment for cemetery, fire protection, hospital, museum, rural healthcare, senior, citizen, solid waste, and weed and pest districts, but the statutory language for flood control and water conservation districts limit the power of commissioners. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, there are other models. Districts are responsible for submitting reports to the Department of Audit. And if they are in non-compliance with that, then the county can withhold funding to that special district until that occurs. And depending on the determination of the Department of Audit, that can start dissolution proceedings. But that's not entirely a straightforward process either. There are some special districts that are excluded from the dissolution procedures. There are certain powers that the commissioners can exert in that process, but it's not uniform or all empowering to county commissioners. Again, there are special districts that are appointed by the commissioners. There are others that are elected. So I think all these things are things that you'll have to consider. I do see clerks are here in the room. They have a role in this, obviously, with the elections that come along with special districts. For those of you that were involved in the public records work just a couple of years ago, for certain special districts, a majority of the small special districts, the clerks are responsible for holding their public records and responding to certain public records requests. Again, these are all burdens that happen to fall back on county commissioners, depending on how you structure these. I'm not here to suggest that this conversation shouldn't take place. We're willing to participate in the conversation, but we're going to be interested in again, what are those constructs that come forward that involve the commissioners and other county officials? Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll be happy to take any questions and appreciate your time.
Thank you. President Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeremiah, excuse my ignorance, so please educate me. Most of these, if I understand right, most of these special districts, cultural or community or such that we've been discussing today, wouldn't those be more municipality type of districts? And would the county commissioners be involved in those or not?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, I think the short answer is it depends on how you structure it. Certainly you can provide the authority for it to be at the municipal level. There are other constructs that allow it for either to be the county boundaries, to be some subset of the county boundaries. All of those are up to you, but certainly of interest to my members. Oftentimes, they have to be larger than a municipality in order to capture enough revenue in order to fund the district, which obviously brings other interests into play, including the energy industry that often is captured in that. So it really, the short answer is it's up to you.
Senator Scott.
First, am I correct in understanding that you said that the special districts are about $1 billion a year or a biennium?
Mr. Chairman, my testimony, Senator Scott, is that that is an annual figure.
Mr. Chairman, let me just put that in a little perspective. The state general and federal fund budget is in the vicinity of 9.3 billion a biennium. So 4.6, 4.7 billion a year. So we're talking about something that's roughly 20% of what the state funds. If you look comparable, education, including the local, is K-12 is 4 billion a year. University is about $1 billion. This is a biennium again, so 2 billion and $500 million, et cetera. Health is just under 2 billion a year, close to $1 billion a year. We're talking something that is comparable to one of our major state efforts here.
Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Riemann?
Mr. Chairman, I would.
Senator Case.
One thing to keep in mind in all this about districts, especially with respect to mill levies, is that the Constitution does restrict mill levies. There's 12 mill levies for the county, and there are 8 mill levies for municipalities. And so if you live in a municipality, you also pay the county mill levy. So that's an important thing. Some of the litigation involving special districts has involved whether the districts are actually performing functions that the municipality or the county should perform, and that it really is a subterfuge to try to, and I'm basically getting that's Representative Duncan's question, I hope, that it's a subterfuge to get around the mill levy cap in the Constitution. So for that reason, there's been a foray down the road of not matching up the district boundaries with any other political subdivision to kind of, so usually a district that encompasses the county doesn't actually use those county boundaries. It's not always true. And the litigation, I think, is especially robust around fire protection districts, as I remember. So that's why you see districts not necessarily have municipal boundaries, because you could certainly make a prima facie argument that that should come under the municipal. It's a municipal function that should come under the municipal cap. And Mr. Riemann probably can do a much better job on that than me, but that's some of the agony of the special districts task force that I think you weren't with the commissioners at that time, you lucky soul. But anyway, it was a rough task force, very, very contentious. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Riemann. Maybe you remember some of that.
Anything you'd like to add on to that question, Mr. Riemann?
Mr. Chairman, some of those scars remain with my members.
Further discussion or questions for Mr. Riemann? Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Riemann, I'm just trying to consider the certain communities would like these special districts and other communities wouldn't. And I represent 3 different counties, and I know some would not like a cultural special district at all. This is an example. So I'm trying to get to the point of if a community did want a special district, a cultural district, you know, in the effort of local control, is it the county? And Senator Case helped me with this a little bit, but would there be the option of the county saying yes or no to these special districts? And And then if it didn't work out, would they have the opportunity to dissolve a special district?
Mr. Riemann?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Roscoe, in terms of the establishment of the special district, you really hold the cards in terms of what that looks like and whether it is a county choice or whether that's something that the voters themselves have that authority. So yes, some of my members likely would support this. I think my members have often supported a number of special districts and then after the fact have had some frustrations. So really, I guess the short answer, going back to even Representative Duncan's question, is it's your choice as we go about this process, but we'll certainly provide some input on that. To your question about dissolution, it's not straightforward. I know that back in 2016, that committee did consider whether county commissioners should be granted more authority around dissolution if they weren't satisfied. That's not how it generally stands today. That effort was not passed. I'd be happy to talk about what exists today, but largely it requires certain actions to have happened that are outside the control of county commissioners before ever moving forward with dissolution.
For the Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Riemann, this is a question that would be on a more universal scale. And so, as you mentioned, there were a lot of special districts that were set up, and not all of them contained a system of either questioning or challenging the decisions that are made by those special districts. And looking at some of the people who are lining up to testify later on, I think we may have one of those disgruntled groups coming up later on. So my question would be, would it be worthwhile for our committee to look into some kind of a standardized administrative, maybe based on the administrative hearing program that we have statewide, where there was a standardized system where if there was a entity which disagreed with the results or the decisions of a special district, that they could start first with the Office of Administrative Hearings at little or no cost. And if they couldn't get a satisfactory resolution there, then maybe go to the district court without a jury, and then start moving up so that all of these, we would have a standardized system across the state and people would know how they could move forward as opposed to trying to dig through the statutes and find out that maybe when that special district was formed, there is no mention of how you question or appeal or dispute. So I'd be curious your opinion about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Riemann.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that I have a precise answer for you, Representative McGuire. It seems to me that, in my limited experience of digging into these special district issues, that it does deserve some uniformity across things. And what you present, I think likely would be favorable to the commissioners that I work with, such that they're not always the judge and jury around things that they frankly don't even have the power to be judge and jury around.
Success. Further questions for the County Commissioners Association? Seeing none at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Riemann. And thank you for kind of your testimony in all special districts. Anyone else specifically on creative districts? Ms. Come on down, man. We'll just save you for a bit. I think committee, because community development districts do have some tangential effect to what we're talking about, I would like to discuss those as well as part of the conversation. Oh, you're welcome to pick any one of those 3 seats you'd like. And as soon as the microphone turns green, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members, for addressing these issues. My name is Lindsay Grant, and I drove down this morning from Casper, so I come with just a little bit of feedback from Natrona County. As I was driving down this morning, I was remembering how many hours and days and different months and seasons that I spent on the road traveling across Wyoming to go see some of our amazing resources, such as the Buffalo Bill in Cody, driving to Lander for a music festival, or over to Jackson to enjoy performance at the Center for the Arts. In many of those drives down to I-25, it was often on my way out of the state. So I was headed to Denver to see a performance, go to a different type of a museum, eat at a different restaurant. Those different types of activities were sort of where I was, what I was doing. And now I'm excited to be staying in Wyoming for those things. And on the subject of creative districts and the work that I do now, which I'm excited to tell you a little bit about, it's one of those things that can help fund and lift up some of these communities, such as Natrona County, which I'll speak towards, of course, and has all of this has driven the work that I've been doing within the nonprofit sector for the last 10 years. I've lived in other places, and I stay in Wyoming because I love it, and we're willing to drive to all different types of things because they matter and we care. I drove here this morning because this matters, and I'm excited to continue this conversation on any kind of special district, whether or not that's tourism, arts and culture, creative districts of the like, because it helps me in my role as an executive director of a nonprofit called The Lyric, develop a diverse set of tools that help me fund the different things that I'm working on with this project. So I am working to raise capital for a performing arts center in Casper, Wyoming. It's a performing arts center that doesn't exist in our community at this time. And we have a big lift. It's a big project that we've been working on in our community for quite some time, and are steps and steps closer every time. The idea of special district funding allows me to have another tool in my fundraising toolbox. In the audience behind me, there's several people here who are also part of that toolbox, and that's city support. Carter Napier here is from the city of Casper, and I look to him as a partner in this project as well as folks like Michael Lang and the Wyoming Arts Council who support that, and hundreds of donors that will come to support this project as well. And this can be one of those tools that help us not only fundraise faster, which is exciting. Our construction project will impact the city of Casper and Natrona County with a $45 million economic impact to our community through our construction phase. That's incredibly important right now. That's people at work, industries supporting supplies to us as well in order to get this funded. After we are operational, it continues to multiply. Really excited about multiplier projects that not only is it serving one purpose, but it also supports tourism, restaurant industry, job creation, all of these other different types of things that will come into play once it is built. The Lyric is located in the center of Casper. If you're familiar with David Street Station, then you've seen that economic development spur all kinds of change in that region, in that part of downtown, and kind of, waking a sleeping giant that is a really awesome core of the community. More restaurants have been started, more shifts for people have begun, and other development projects, private development projects, are taking place now because of that. That's the kind of catalytic change that we look to build as the Lyric, changing the cultural landscape and as well as the economic landscape in our own community. Future, as we are open, 32% of our attendees of performances and events and things that happen in Casper will come from outside of Natrona County. That's exciting for us because that should be exciting for all of Wyoming. That's all of you coming to a performance that you're excited to see in Casper. That's driving and hotel stays and coming in for a weekend and extended shopping stays. And those are all additional dollars. So I certainly have a lot of passion towards the arts economy of Wyoming, and recognizing the importance that we do contribute to the state's economy. And I just want to say, Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for considering these districts, and I look forward to participating in the process as not only a member of the Wyoming Arts Alliance, as a representative of the Lyric and a business owner as well in Casper, Wyoming. Thank you.
Do you have any data, when you said 32% come from outside Natrona County? How many of those are in-state Wyoming versus perhaps other states coming to Casper?
I would have to reference my, Mr. Chairman, I'd have to reference that the business plan that we created. We used, this was a few years ago, an outside firm to collect this data and look at similar other communities in order to do that. I would say a hearty amount of that number would be from Wyoming.
Questions, committee, Ms. Crane. Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've forgotten your name, but I would just like to ask if your nonprofit has seen, we've heard so much about people working remotely since this pandemic and this influx of young people that can do that. Have you gotten any calls questioning, you know, the what you do and the value of that in your community, and would it, you know, would it help them make a decision on maybe moving to Casper? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Roscoe, wonderful question. I wouldn't say that I've had specific questions from those types of live work individuals who want to work anywhere and live in Wyoming. The conversations that we're having are people who are recruiters, who are recruiting those professionals to our community, who want to show a diverse, livable community. That's what we're all pretty excited about. And I'm, you know, have so many amazing things to say about Casper and Natrona County and the things that we have to offer, which is in terms of outdoor recreation, the shopping. I mean, we have all of those things, and we have the space to grow for things like a tech industry, medical tech industry, all of the stuff. So the recruiters and those types of economic development folks are the ones that we're talking to that do spur those conversations that make it exciting to bring those people into our communities to work or start a business, start another type of an industry as well. I'm interested in also keeping people here, keeping our young people here. And the hours that I spent on the road driving to Denver when I was 21, whether or not they're going to stay or maybe they go, but they come back because they know this is the great place that it is to raise a family and spend time here. And we have those assets in our communities or around the state that do it. Not every community in Wyoming is going to want or need to support a 1,200 seat auditorium the way that Casper, Wyoming will, but someone from a neighboring county certainly would be excited to drive to, well, I don't want to speak for them, but I'm sure, coming to Casper for a weekend and being, coming and shopping and staying and hanging out and seeing a performance that is of a quality that we can provide is very exciting. Thank you for your question.
This whole committee was excited to go to Casper today, but we didn't make it. So hopefully,
As
sometime
was
in
I
the-
excited.
As you would have been more excited if we'd driven up there. So several people from Natrona County. Further questions, Ms. Grant? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then committee, if you remember in the, at our interim committee meeting, one of the ways we talked about what we're now talking about creative districts or cultural districts was really through the community development districts legislation that we previously had. And that is why it was originally on the agenda, and then we expanded the agenda specifically to put creative arts. And so I'd like to morph into community development districts briefly. I believe everybody in the committee has seen the bill at least once in their tenure. It passed the Senate, didn't make it to the House, passed the House, and make the Senate. But I know Senator Nethercott was the last major champion of the legislation, which failed by only a couple of votes in the House. I tried really hard as a co-sponsor, Senator. I apologize again. But could you just walk us through, I think it's on page 208 in your electronic materials committee, and then certainly for members on online or in person, it's in the meeting materials. But Senator Nethercott, could you just give us a rundown of the community development district and the concept, what we were going for?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Just a point of clarification for the public and for the committee. I did not ask for this topic to be placed on the interim work, despite my efforts in years prior. It's not that I like to continue to fail and have a story of triumph eventually. Was ready to move on despite the continued need. But again, as we've seen, my motivation for bringing the bill for 3 years and its presence here today as an interim topic without my advocacy on it is because of the community's desire. So I think that's important for us to take into consideration. The bill in front of you is one that was adopted from a bill draft that I had originally worked on called Community Development Districts that the Corporations Committee did adopt in 19. And it provides some of the detail and tangible solutions that I think many committee members have been looking for in hearing the testimony from the arts and cultural districts, which really provided us no guidance as to what they want or how they want it to be formed or what it should look like. This bill, I believe, could be used for any purpose, whether it be tourism, whether it be arts, whether it be any interest that somebody could have with some special tweaking of the bill. Of note, I'm going to encourage you to go to page 7 of the bill draft. And I'm going to kind of walk you through the bill draft in a non-linear fashion because it'll help you, I think, work through the legalities associated with the formation, the oversight, the creation, and the purposes of one of these districts. So on page 7, you can see the creation of the district, lines 11, and I wasn't intending to present this bill today, so this could be rocky. So on page lines 11 through 14, proceedings for the formation of a district shall commence by filing a petition addressed to the governing body of the municipality in which the land proposed to be included in the district is situated. So this is a municipality and it's limited to a municipality. Why is it limited to a municipality? Because municipalities currently can't do this. This particular scheme for special districts is allowed in Title 18 for counties. So counties can do this, municipalities can't. Important concept to understand. Service districts are allowed, or DDAs, downtown development authorities, are allowed, but you've heard testimony that the DDAs really aren't as effective because they don't generate enough money to do anything of value, is typically the concern, because the large property is usually those industrial properties that generate more assessments. But nonetheless, that's up to the creators of the district to decide whether or not it's worth their efforts or not. So this would be at the approval of elected officials within a municipality. Again, the purpose of this bill was for real estate developments or community developments as opposed to tourism or as opposed to arts. But again, you can imagine it could be shifted for those purposes. This is based on a percentage of the landowners. Again, that number is certainly up to our discretion for what that should be for who approves the special district. And it's based on an assessed value of the land. Moving on down to the following page. Upon receipt of a valid petition, the governing body of the municipality reviews it. They go through the entire review process for how that looks. Public hearings take place. And what documents need to be submitted to the governing body, you can look at the bottom of page 9, which is a general plan. Lines 13 through 14 on page 9, the district has to submit a general plan to the governing body, and that plan has to be a description for the purpose of the district. What are you really trying to accomplish? We've heard a variety of kind of ideas out there about what could be used with additional revenues, which is certainly not hard to do, but this really requires anybody who wants to create a district to really commit themselves to what the purpose of it might be. And then it's limited to those purposes as described. And it continues to be limited, and there are the details about that. And again, it's limited to what that general plan may be, but on page 10, line 22, the plan might be amended. And again, it has to be submitted to the board of the governing body to amend or change that plan. So you have some of those checks and balances associated with approval by elected officials. Notification requirements on the bottom of page 11, like lines 10, to those affected landowners. Public meetings have to take place. So all of those typical protections that we already see in Title 18 associated with the creation of the special districts is in this bill. The powers of the district, you can see there, this is not new or unique language. This is language that's found in Title 18 and is found with most public entities that have the ability to sue and be sued, have a corporate seal, all of that customary language. So again, not unique. Except for, I want to direct your attention to page 14, lines 9 through 14, and there's another reference to this in the bill. So provide all services not customarily available within the municipality and necessary to protect the health and welfare of residents in the district. This particular provision, and again, it's referenced a couple of times in the bill, is intended to be consistent with the constitutionality of the bill and Supreme Court precedent. As you heard Senator Case testify, there are constitutional limitations on how many mill levies can be assessed. The Supreme Court has interpreted that to be limited to, or only apply to, that limitation apply to those services that a municipality or governing body is required to provide. So the Supreme Court has identified that hospital districts are not required by municipalities to provide, but fire districts are. And so a fire district is something that would be included in the total mill levy consideration that a municipality or the government entity has the ability to assess. So it could interfere with that. Or it may not, depending on its purpose and plan. And that's, of course, is subject to the governing body. Here, again, was the purposes of this bill, page 14, line 16. Again, this bill was directed at residential developments for the expanding growth really of Cheyenne. And so these were some of these purposes associated with that. Arguably, some of these things would be considered part of the health and safety, but there's some safety measures associated in the bill too, that if the city is currently not already providing it, and then once those services are in place, that the assessment ceases. So key pieces there. Moving down to page 15, who comprises the board of directors, who appoints them, some great compromises there about terms and how long they can be there. Again, assigned by the board of directors or by the governing body, so the city council. Moving down is the requirements associated with the intent to provide the assessment. Again, all of those are consistent with statute now and what that process looks like. Requiring publication in your local newspaper. I know something that everyone cares about very dearly in this body. The notice of the apportionment of assessment, the levy, the administration, who collects it, the county assessor, rules and regulations and enforcement. So going back up, I think that's helpful to start there to the beginning of the bill in that nonlinear fashion here, the definitions. Are easier to see as explained there. I'm going to find, turning your attention to page 6, lines 2 through 11. Again, here's more of those protections associated with the Constitution and Supreme Court precedent. A district shall not be formed to provide improvements and services defined by the municipality as basic and customarily available to residents, except that a district may be formed to provide these improvements or services if the improvement or service is not in fact available to residents. And if a municipality subsequently provides an improvement or service that a district was created to provide, the district shall dissolve. Right, so this doesn't go on in perpetuity potentially, which is really important, I think, if you're talking about a tax generation. And also if the purpose of the plan is met, the district shall dissolve as well. So hopefully that provides, I think, some tangible concepts for the committee to consider as we learn about these requests from the state stakeholders concerning cultural districts, art districts, museum districts, which are already allowed in statute again in Title 18 as well, and not necessarily within the municipality, but something at least for us to work with and get our arms around. So happy to stand for questions on the bill draft.
Questions for Senator Nethercott on Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, as I recall, this particular bill draft, there was some proposals for development here in Cheyenne. Have those now either occurred or been abandoned? And one way or another, taken the pressure off getting something done statutorily here, or Is that still a pending issue here?
Senator Nethercott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, it is still a pending issue here. The Cheyenne is experiencing a housing shortage. Cheyenne is experiencing a housing shortage. And so the problem persists. One of the primary developments, which was the genesis of this bill back in 2017, is underway and ongoing in smaller steps and increments than I think the developer had hoped, and probably smaller in scale as to what the community actually needs in order to keep up with the necessary growth and availability of affordable housing. So the need persists, and I think you'll hear testimony from stakeholders in the Cheyenne community about that need.
Follow up, Senator Scott.
Yeah, a question on the bill draft, different subject.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, on page 15, lines 12 through 13, this is in the list of things that the district can do. Does a catch-all do any or all other things necessary to carry out the purposes of the district? Would that include the power of eminent domain?
Senator Nethercott, good luck.
Mr. Chairman, I believe not. But I would need to look at LSO to do some legal research on that. But I do believe the constitutional limitations probably associated with an appointed board limited to a scope and purpose is not eminent domain. That would be an unreasonable interpretation, I believe.
We clamped down on eminent domain pretty hard in 08, 09 here after that Tito decision. I would think not, but.
The LSO attorneys are not making eye contact with me, and so I believe they are unaware of that answer as well. And so they'll go with my impulsive legal advice.
Another follow-up, Senator Scott, or a new question.
A new question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Nethercott looks forward to it. Go ahead.
On page 8, line 6, there's some, or that whole subsection B on page 8, there's a provision where they negotiate and change the boundaries of the district. And then there's a requirement that the governing body, city council, I guess, shall call an election. That would appear to deny the municipality discretion as to say, no, that's not a good idea. We shouldn't go forward with it at all. Because they then, once the requirements are met, have to call an election. Is that a correct interpretation of that?
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I do see the word shall there. So I would agree with that interpretation. I think a couple of things are important to recognize, probably the practical limitation associated with that shall, which is it's only once they approve the plan, right? So if they approve the plan, that means it's a go. And so if they don't want it to go, they don't approve the plan, and that would be their ultimate control. And so then once they approve the plan, the election shall take place, and that election shall be at the expense of the district and not the municipality.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a couple questions. Could we theoretically use this in some of our more expensive communities for affordable housing, in the sense, instead of a transfer tax? So could we do this for, there's been a transfer tax multiple times brought to the legislature. So could we do this where those municipalities or those counties could create in these second, third homes that are quite expensive, and they could create an affordable housing? We can't go into perpetuity, but they could put a date, a timeline, or they could put a dollar amount to create a fund for affordable housing, to create affordable communities or affordable projects or units or whatever. Could they do that with this? And do the districts have to be concurrent, or can they make circles in these certain areas?
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, certainly, could the Community Development District Bill be used to create a affordable housing district? The answer is yes, certainly it could be used for that purpose. The reality is probably it would not be, because the landowners affected have to approve it and bring the issue forward. And I think, whereas it could be possible, if that's what they so desired, that it would be improbable to me to imagine that in Teton County, for example, that those high income homes, second and third homes in those communities or areas, geographic areas where those homes are located, that they would get together and decide that they want to provide an assessment on themselves for the purpose of creating affordable housing within that geographic area. Probably unlikely. So I think in reality, the answer is no, it wouldn't happen, because they have to agree to it. They have to bring the petition forward, which makes the bill, I think, more palatable when you're talking about taxing purposes, because the motivation for it has to come from the people who would be affected, right? It's not coming from the government down, it's coming from the bottom up. And so it feels differently that way. It's representation closest to the people, right? Those concepts are there. And so unless those landowners come forward and ask for permission from a governing body to tax themselves, it doesn't take place.
Sometimes those people in Teton County have different ideas about taxes and, right, Representative Roscoe? Okay. Representative Clausen, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So currently, what would keep a neighborhood or a group of homeowners or someone that wanted an extra service from creating a homeowners association and essentially doing the same thing without this legislation?
Senator Nethercott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, they could. It is a similar concept to a homeowners association, except for, so it works similarly in that concept for its purposes. Some of the benefits to it are that you're not electing your neighbors necessarily. There's more public oversight, theoretically. So, there's public records. There are public meetings that take place. Notifications regarding the assessments are more robust as opposed to your bylaws, that are facilitated by your property manager who likely lives in Northern Colorado. Speaking from personal experience at some point, yes.
And I would just think that the bill contemplates kind of a larger levels or larger scale swimming pools, tennis courts, something more than a homeowners association for a larger geographic area and larger amenities. When you read through the bill, street lights, paving, something to that extent. So that it may be a much larger homeowners association. Senator Scott, question.
Mr. Chairman, following up on that, one thing that a district is a public entity as opposed to a homeowner association, a private entity. If there are potential public funds, state funds, such as grants from the slip board that might be involved, a district could apply for those. You have 16(6) problems preventing a homeowners association from doing that directly, I think. And I don't know whether that's of significance in this circumstance or not.
Other questions? So I guess maybe my ultimate question then, Senator Nethercott, when we're looking at creative districts or cultural districts, do you think the community development district legislation that has been through the process 3 times and had a lot of review, oversight, thoughts, would it incorporate the creative arts district concepts we talked about today, or could we, I believe we have amended it to include different things over the years, but certainly several more sentences that would fully encapsulate what a creative arts district could be and allow that as another tool. In your mind, would that be a good fit into this potentially?
Mr. Chairman, yes. I mean, I do think it could easily be weaved in, dovetailed in to, because what you're talking about is the lawful procedural process associated with the creation of a taxing district, right? Its purposes are irrelevant, right? I mean, to necessarily for us, so long as the governing body approves for that community, right? So whatever the community feels it's necessary to create is up to that community and that governing body. So, certainly it could be used for that. I mean, the question comes down to potentially to those that are asking for these tools in the toolbox. There are lots of tools in our statutory toolbox that go underutilized. And so the reality of the question is, will it actually make a meaningful difference for what you're trying to accomplish? And I don't know the answer to that because it's not entirely clear to me what you're trying to accomplish, which is unique in all the communities. But the purpose of the Community Development District Bill is pretty narrow in scope in order to kind of provide some safeguards or some parameters on taxing, right? What are appropriate times to issue some type of an assessment or tax. So we could expand that, but I just think it's important to recognize the inherent limitations. If the DDA district bill, if the DDAs are not effective at generating assessments, will this bill do anything different for you? That's a question that the stakeholders need to answer. We're happy to champion another tool in the toolbox for economic development for the state, but is it going to have a meaningful impact?
I think that's fair. And when I read through the Community Development District bill, it does, I would say, and you helped draft it, or you did draft it, it was more of an infrastructure related amenities and costs, not so much service level or service oriented funding for what I read other states are doing when it comes to creative districts, is more of a financial help through goods and services, not through infrastructural type amenities. So maybe it might not be the best vehicle. Any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, I think again, the vehicle is a good vehicle. Whether or not it meets the needs again of those stakeholders, I don't know. It is important to go back to some of the challenges, why the bill was brought in the first place and what the developer was experiencing on the ground for a growing community of Cheyenne, which is in an area in close proximity to the city that was in the county. They wanted to develop in a much needed residential neighborhood. The local water district could not provide the level of service required for that type of development. And so through years of struggle, that then the development decided to be annexed into the city to be able to access the city's water system, which theoretically could. The costs associated with that were astronomical and arguably prohibitive of the development, including the necessary paving of roads and curbing and streetlights that go along with the creation of a residential neighborhood. And so there was this gap of resource and a much needed community-based need that the city of Cheyenne couldn't arguably provide because they also weren't in a position to respond to the level of development that was occurring, and neither was our rural county. And so it really was intended to bridge a gap associated with, if we don't want out-of-state mega developers coming in, which we don't have anyway, but theoretically, if we did, where you're limiting who actually can develop a community and provide affordable housing to just mega developers, that's a real problem for us, right? We'll never grow at that point. It has to be our local folks who are choosing to develop in their own communities, which is what this was, and providing those available tools in those development toolboxes, right?
Okay, further questions? Not seeing any. Let me just double check the internet to make sure there's no one online on community development districts. Not seeing any. So committee, I'm looking for any guidance. We can move on to tourism improvement districts and water and sewer districts. I like to think in my mind, those are somewhat separate than community development or creative districts. And so if anyone wants to request a bill draft or a way forward now, certainly be happy to hear it. Representative Duncan. If you turn your microphone on, and you can do whatever you'd like.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to have a bill draft for community developments.
The bill draft before us to be redone with updated language for our next meeting. Is there a second for that? second by Roscoe. Discussion. Would you like anything amended into it or possible LSO considerations of amendments that would take creative districts into account or affordable housing into account? Or just have it drafted and then we can bring amendments at the appropriate time?
I think amendments to appropriate time.
Okay. Any further discussion on having this committee have a bill draft on community development districts for our next meeting? Representative McClawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just some concerns. I mean, we've seen this several times, but the gray area and cost shifting from the developer to the taxpayer is my concern when you get into these rural subdivisions. It's something Wyoming's struggled with for ever and ever. When you go clear to our water development needs, it's all the way to the front to back is what we've, and especially in my community. And I just have real concerns with filling that gap that should go to the developer, get into this gray area of creating a taxing, just to have serious concerns.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Nethercott.
in response to that, the developer is the landowner and the developer is paying the assessment along with the others, which is 9 out of 10 times the case. Because the developer owns the land that they're developing, right? They're not leasing it. They're owning that land. And so they themselves are paying the assessment as well. They're one of the landowners that vote on whether or not to move forward.
Representative Duncan.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to also add on to that, the homeowner, the person who's purchasing the property is actually ultimately paying all of that. It gets passed through, just like all of the taxes, the fees and things on a purchase of a vehicle gets passed on to the purchase of every product. So the homeowner ends up paying for everything in the end.
Through cost. Representative Clausen. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly my concern. So the concerns I see is, so cost shifting, so you could cost shift your development costs into originally your land costs or your lot costs and then push them out over time with this sort of a thing. And I could see it being gamed in a pretty big way with pretty big dollars. That's just my concern.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, responding to that, seems to me particularly in the water development area, our current system has been, we build it, it's got inadequate resources for water and sewer. We then come back and at greater expense, fix it after the fact with slip board grants and whatnot. I've seen that done in my community. Are we better off handling some of these things with the district up front that can get a more rational and perhaps cheaper plan to start with that meets all the needs, as opposed to our current system of doing it inadequately and then fixing.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of having a bill draft for our next meeting, please say aye. Opposed, say no. Let me see a show of hands. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. And then that motion passes. We'll have a bill draft. Anything on creative arts districts, motions? Keep thinking about it. All right. I'm trying to decide if you guys. You have a comment? Sure.
I think.
Mike, though.
The rest of these areas, I think, all roll into potentially one bill. They're all similar things. And the tourism improvement districts, creative arts, they're a little different area. And I think parks is going to be coming. They all can fall under a general area rather than having all sorts of specific legislation. Just something to think about as we go into it.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Let's move on to sewer water districts only because I know that we have several people from Casper drove all the way down and I can make my Cheyenne people stay around and they can dislike me more if they have to come back this afternoon. Yes. I assume that means Representative Sweeney is going to kick us off on the water sewer discussion. Anyone you want to bring up with you at this time? You want to? Committee, when we start at 9, I didn't anticipate giving everyone a break, but if you want to come back after lunch, we can take a 10-minute break now. It's up to you. Otherwise, you're free. Anyone's free to take a break at their convenience. Does the entire committee want a break? I think we're going to keep moving, but take a break at your convenience during the testimony. All right, with that, Representative Sweeney, let's talk about waters and sewers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue before you on water sewer is totally different than what you've been talking about. In particular, I'll call your attention to basically Title 41 in Chapter 10 is where we'll end up in the discussion. So in the House, this was a proposed bill that House Bill 72 that just for one reason or another didn't end up getting heard after, Mr. Chairman, 4 times, 5 times, I think. So what we're going to provide today is testimony on what's the problem that we're looking at, and leave it up to you. We have some suggestions for the committee on how to solve it, but leave it up to you to head that way. So I'd rather defer. I've got several people lined up. The mayor of, we're talking, this particular water sewer district is in my district, and in particular, it's Wardwell. It's not a special improvement district. It's title or Chapter 10 deals with water sewer districts. And we believe there's a gap. When a town such as Bar None, this particular Wardwell water was incorporated and put into place in 1964. At the time, I don't believe the town of Bar None had become a town. And the mayor of Bar None is online to help clarify some of these things. But so how does a community, as it grows, basically take over those services? Wardwell currently, of their territory, approximately 70% of their users live in Bar None. And approximately 11% live in Mills's territory. And unincorporated is the rest, which is primarily industrial, which is also Natrona County in the unincorporated, but it is in the city of Casper's growth boundary, not Bar None, not Mills. So that's why Casper, the city manager, is here, Carter Napier, to also add conversation to this. So that's part of the problem. And we believe that this isn't over. And how do we resolve this for the future on growth of other municipalities that see the same predicament? So with that, I would ask a little leeway, Mr. Chairman, because we may need second testimony as we go along on this. But if I could lead off with the mayor of Bar None, Patrick Ford, and they are gathered at Mills, the city of Mills's town hall And if we could kick off with him and then possibly go to Commissioner Chairman of the Natrona County Commission, Paul Bertolio after that, and after that, whatever your pleasure is.
Certainly could. So I'm trying to get the issue in, let's say, 3 sentences or less. The issue is we have an existing water sewer district that over 60 years, 2 incorporated municipalities have now grown over. You have users of the system in 2, maybe 3 separate municipalities, and as well as an unincorporated area. And the issue is they want to dissolve, they want to divide. Give me the statement of problem in 3 sentences or less.
The town of Bar None now feels constricted by this water and sewer district and would like to take over. And the county commission doesn't believe by vote of the users that necessarily they can do that under state statute, because water sewer districts are not as general in statute as improvement districts.
Got it. All right, and I believe they are all with, under Ms. Kemper's name. You have a question, Senator Boner?
Thank you, Commissioner. Just to make sure I understand, there's no mechanism to dissolve the water and sewer district at all, or there's just not an easy one that they want to take advantage of right now?
It appears,
Sweeney?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. There appears a gap. A water sewer district is basically a quasi city or town. And with with very little governmental oversight, in my opinion, limited opinion. But there is a process, but if a water sewer district disagrees, who are they answerable to?
All right, with that, I believe we'll turn it over to the town of Mills. Under Ms. Kemper, you have the floor.
All right. Well, Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for hearing this issue today. My name is Patrick Ford. I'm the mayor of Bar None, and we're kind of huddled around here. Apologize for not being down there today. We've got other meetings this evening that precluded us from being able to get down there in person. So Representative Sweeney did a good job of succinctly covering essentially how we arrived here. The water district that provides water to 100% of the town of Bar None originated in 1964. The town of Bar None incorporated in 1982, and at which time, under current statute, any municipality within 1 mile of a water district could opt to absorb their debt and take over the system. I'm sure you can imagine in 1982, with only a few hundred people, they weren't sure that they wanted to take over the debt that was the entire district. So the town opted not to do that. The problem is as the town grew, there's now no mechanism in state statute, now that they're debt-free, for us to take them over and dissolve them. The debt's been absorbed by regional water, and regional water said that the debt that has been absorbed is being currently serviced by all of the water rates that everybody pays anyways. So it's not a matter of if Wardwell Water has any debt and they're servicing the debt, it's all of the users individually servicing the debt that was absorbed. So there is no more debt on the district, but there's no mechanism in statute currently outlined that allows us to move forward in a clear-cut manner to take over the water service that the town should be providing. Bar None's about 3,000 people now. We have the staff, we have the capability, we run a sewer system, we provide services to all of the residents of Bar None. We don't feel that it's outside the scope or unreasonable that we should be able to control our own water service. Things that go along with that is customer service, tap fees, water rates. I have a handful of developers that have come to us and said, we just flat out won't develop in your community because it's cost prohibitive and the pain and agony of having to jump through the extra municipal hoops because there's another quasi municipal entity that they have to work with to get any infrastructure, tap fees, permits, things of that sort. So we're kind of in this critical position as a town where we don't have a whole lot of control over our own future because of this entity that we don't have any say over. And in addition to that, when we first started down this road, I didn't realize it even myself, but everybody in the town of Arnun, the unincorporated area, or even in the parts of Mills, they're all subject to an extra 8 mills of property tax that the water district is currently collecting on 100% of their customer base. So this also serves to reduce property taxes on anyone that's in the either community or in the unincorporated area.
All right, any questions for Mayor Ford? Representative McGuire, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned the mills that are currently being charged, that's 8 mills. And my question is with regard to when the water district submits its audited report to the county commission, which I presume that they do, are they currently running at a zero profit? Or are they currently running at a profitable amount, and do they have savings that they have accumulated over the years? Thank you.
Mr. Ford, if you know.
Yeah, so Representative McGuire, that's a good question. What I can tell you is they have roughly about $3 million in reserves. And when you figure in about that 8 mills factored in on the residents of the area and the landowners, business owners, you can account for most of that cash reserve being built up as a direct result of that 8 mills.
Further questions? Senator Scott.
I'd like if we could get Mayor Ford to explain what's the interplay between the regional operation and Wardwell. How do they interrelate? Who does what? That sort of thing.
Mayor, if you know.
Yep, so I can, Senator Scott, I'll try to speak to that as best I can. So Paul might have a little bit more detailed information on that. But at some point in the early 90s, when Regional Water was formed, Wardwell Water wanted to become a part of Regional Water. As part of that agreement, the debt that they had incurred for any infrastructure improvements then became Regional Water's debt. And as a commingling of debt of these different districts, it's all essentially paid for via the water rate that Regional Water sets. At that point, Wardwell Water is not required to have their own water treatment plant or anything of that sort. They've got transmission lines that come from Regional Water to actual end users of the district via the system that's in place today. Does that answer your question?
Senator Scott?
It does, it certainly does in part. So basically, let's see if I'm getting it right. Regional Water is providing the water treatment plant and the actual water, and Wardwell is then managing the distribution system. Is that how it's working?
Mayor Ford?
Senator Scott, that is correct. They do the meter reading. They do the water sampling at the more localized level to make sure that all of that stuff is in accordance with requirements. They do the billing, permits for any new water. So essentially the same thing that the town is already doing for all of the sewer and trash services that are provided to our community. They provide just the water portion of that to the residents of Bar None. So there is a significant overlap, not only in staff and job duties, but the maintenance staff, even the cost of postage to send out duplicate bills to over 1,000 customers is a lot of redundancy that we've identified.
Okay, Representative Clausen, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, so there would be a methodology for the municipality to take them over if they had debt, but since they don't have debt and they're actually a reserve, there is no methodology. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Representative Clausen, as I understand it, essentially the way statute reads is it more or less was assuming that once the debt was retired, as you read through the statute, and I'm no attorney, but as you look through it, it appears that statute made the assumption that essentially once a district no longer had any debt, that the natural progression and logical progression would be for that district to follow what the original plan was when the municipality incorporated within 1 mile of said district. The problem is it's not spelled out crystal clear cut in statute. So then you get into the argument of one side says, well, no, that's not what statute meant to do. The other side says, well, it doesn't say it explicitly, but it definitely logically points that direction. So that's essentially how we've come to this, this point of needing help from the legislature.
Further questions? Not seeing any currently. Is there anyone else, Mayor Ford, there in the room with you who wishes to testify on this?
We have Mayor Coleman here.
Hey, Mayor Coleman of Mills. Thoughts?
Good morning. So Mills has some of the same issues that Bar None does, but there are some differences. So the property valuation of the Wardwell District, 11% of it lies within the city of Mills. As far as the land area of the city of Mills, 20% of it approximately lies within the Wardwell District. All of that area is prime ground for industrial and commercial development. With the way the Wardwell District works, it makes an extra layer of bureaucracy and taxation that is very burdensome and expensive to anybody developing in that area in Mills. We have been very focused the last 4 or 5 years with creating an economic development plan and starting to move that forward. Working on economic diversification as well as economic development, trying to tie all of those things together. We're hitting a wall trying to bring different entities in because of this district, because of the absorbent cost of development, as well as the extremely high tap fees and those different negatives. You know, it's an unneeded layer of government. A city and town, the things that they're best at, even if they're failing at everything else, is providing water, sewer, and sanitation. Mills is more than capable of taking over that portion, which lies within its boundaries, just as Bar None is. There is no reason for this extra taxation and extra bureaucracy, but there does not seem to be a clear path to dissolve this district. You know, we went to the effort of collecting signatures from 25% of the landowners owning at least 25% of the valuation of the district and submitted those to the commission. But as they reviewed it, they weren't sure that was the right process. So that's what we're really asking for, is a clear process for the logical development of a city and town that is dealing with a district.
Let me throw some questions at you then, Mayor. Senator Boner, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may get this wrong. I'm certainly not an attorney either, but I'm looking through Title 41, 10-113, talking about the power of the district. board and the Roman end looks like 24, it looks like the district has the ability to dissolve and, when its debts have been satisfied, but certainly not required to. So that board does have the ability, and if I'm misunderstanding that, first of all, please correct me, I very well could be, but there's nothing certainly that requires it, certainly. And the ball's in the court of that district board. So I guess the question is, first of all, once again, if that's not a correct interpretation, please correct that. But second of all, why haven't you talked to the district board, who seems to be in the driver's seat? Certainly some, and if you can't do that, I believe that there's elections for those boards as well. If there's as much grassroots support within the district to get this done, I'm just wondering, it seems to me there very clearly is a path forward, just maybe one that municipalities don't like. I'm just wondering what they've done to try to work within the current system to reach resolution before coming to the legislature.
Mayor Ford, go ahead.
Mayor Coleman, I'm going to answer that one. So, this is a problem that as we talk to people that have been involved in this issue goes back 20 or 30 years. There is no desire on the board's part to dissolve at all whatsoever. And so then you point to the elections, and what we have found there is that the elections are very irregular. In fact, we did submit a petition to the county commissioners based on that. The elections are held in May. We have been able to find no record of advertisement in the local newspaper as far as when those dates are. When we've had different people call the district headquarters and ask when you have to be registered by or submit your application to be a representative on the board or be up for election, we cannot get a clear answer. And so that is an option, and that is something that we're looking at, but it has been very difficult. When you go back and look through meeting minutes, the way these elections work is they put out a sign apparently on the election day that says vote today. The ballots are put in a plywood box. At the end of the day, the board takes them into a room and counts them. There appears over the last 5 or 6 elections that we were able to find meeting minutes on, and we went through, there was 10 to 15 votes total out of 3,000 to 4,000 users in that district, potential voters. So that is part of the issue that we're dealing with. Every property owner, every user of the district that we talk to wants this entity gone. Wardwell Water District spent $40,000 last year installing bulletproof glass. If you look at their meeting minutes, their opinion is the public is unruly and dangerous, so they had to install that. What we hear when we talk to the users and when they bring complaints to us is that the customer service and the attitude that they're given is just horrible. And, there's been lots of people that have tried to solve this. The things have not worked over the years, and that's why we have come to the legislature asking for another solution.
Follow up, Senator Boner.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a very informative answer. And yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at Representative Sweeney's bill, but perhaps more sideboards regarding the governance of these local boards might be in order. Just a suggestion as we look into this.
Other questions for either mayor? Senator Case?
Trying to make it work, Mr. Chairman, but isn't it fair to say for the mayors and for Representative Sweeney, is it, you're just looking for a mechanism to recreate on an ongoing basis for these districts what they had when the towns first came into existence. And in most areas, municipalities of this size do provide their own water to, so you're trying to just make that a possibility, if I understand it correctly. Is that right for the mayors? So the fact
that is.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I'm
Ford.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm shutting up.
That is correct. We're looking for a mechanism that doesn't require a municipality to take action. But if the municipality believes that that is in the best interest of it moving forward to create growth and development, that it has that tool to do so.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, Mayor. So in terms of government, we often are adding layers of government in the work we do. That's what a lot of the special district stuff does. In this case, these guys are kind of asking to reduce a layer of government. And if it doesn't hurt anybody else under the district and the district has no severe consequences of winding it up because the debt's all paid, the stuff's there, the municipalities can do that function. It's arguably a municipal function. Why would we need the extra layer? So making it possible to go that way might be a good government thing. So I think we ought to at least look at it. I'll shut up.
I think Mayor Ford would agree if that was a question to, or Mayor Coleman, either one. Representative Air, questions for either mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I correct in assuming that the water district is subject to the purview of the Public Service Commission?
It is
Mayor
not.
Coleman?
Excuse me. Mr. Chairman, a district such as the Water and Sewer District is not under the purview of the Public Service Commission.
Because it's water and sewer? Okay. Senator Scott, question.
Jim, yeah, a couple of questions. Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to define the potential problem and solution here. It looks to me like maybe there's two steps that need to be taken, and I want to see what the both mayors think of it. The first, if this is a subdivision of the state, political subdivision state, I think we can regulate their means of election. And maybe over a certain size, it strikes me the election procedure they're using is well adapted to a very small water district, but not to a large public one. And that maybe part of the solution is to require the board members to be elected at the general election under the supervision of the county clerk, just like all the rest of the things are done in a general election with standard filing periods and a vote of the people at the general election. I think that might go quite a ways toward solving this problem. And then if we get that problem solved, then I think maybe, Mr. Chairman, we need a merger and dissolution or some other arrangement, which will have to be worked out a little carefully because there's at least two cities involved here in some unincorporated area. And we don't want to deny anybody service and some control over their service. So are those sort of the two nubs of the problem? That the Wardwell district is not behaving as if it were a political subdivision and has gotten outside of popular control. And then we need a mechanism to essentially reorganize based on modern realities. What am I missing in all this?
Mayor Coleman, anything you'd like to add onto that?
Mr. Chairman, so the election, we've thought through that and thought about looking to put that in this bill. The issue becomes is that a lot of the users of this district are industrial businesses, commercial businesses that in a general election, they would not have a vote. And so that seems to be some of the biggest part of the problem, possibly an absentee type mail-in election that was defined better would help with that. But putting it on the general ballot would not solve the problem because there would be quite a bit of the valuation of the district that would not get a vote.
Mr. Chairman.
Let me check if there's any further questions for either mayor while I have those two mayors. Not seeing any right now. Thank you very much, Mayor Coleman, Mayor Ford, for being with us, and we'll keep the discussion going. Representative Sweeney, comments?
Mr. Chairman, if we could lead them online because there's other people to testify later at the Mills Town Hall. But what I'd ask, if a lot of the regional stuff, the chairman of the Natrona County Commission, who was also a several-time mayor of Casper, who knows the regional system and its complexities, is online.
I was going to him next already, Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But now do you get Mr. Bertolio, welcome to corporations. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Paul Bertolio, Chairman of the Natrona County Board of County Commissioners and a regional board member, Central Wyoming Regional Water System Joint Powers Board member. I have served on that as long as I've served on both the city council as well as regional water. I walked across the street after they swore me in to my first regional meeting back in 1998. The regional started as a concept pushed by the state to try and eliminate a lot of cost associated with maintaining a lot of water systems. They came to the city of Casper, wanted to expand didn't want to expand. They were under EPA new guidelines that required a substantial cost increase into the plant. In the course of that, they came to the conclusion that they wanted to start doing regional water systems. So Casper, all the municipalities, Wardwell, we service water all the way up into Midwest Edgerton. They all got together. They worked for a number of years to try and get the system and everybody in agreement to put the system together. At the last minute, Mills and Evansville backed out of the system and Wardwell stayed in. So Wardwell, in the course of joining the system, had, I believe it was either 1.4 or $1.2 million in debt that the regional absorbed. And in return, we got 2 transmission systems, and these 2 transmission systems were put in place, or let me back up a little bit. So Wardwell, prior to that, had water service coming from Mills. The line was cut. These 2 lines were cut specifically based on nothing more than physics. Who could service the water customers based on topography. And today, a lot of that still exists. While Mills may have annexed some of the Wardwell system or the area, they still can't service some of it. The idea behind regional was that the customers would, in the long run, would have lower rates because less capital development would be required to maintain the systems. As we've moved forward, we believe that, regional believes as long as we maintain our customers, we are not going to fight any dissolution of Wardwell, but we continue to want the customers. Those customers are what continue to service our debt, which accounts for, probably a third of the wholesale water rate that we charge to our customers. The conflict from a county standpoint is we don't believe we have jurisdiction because there's a conflict between Title 18, Chapter 12 and Title 41, Chapter 10, in that one references a water and sewer improvement districts and the other is a water and sewer district. There's a lot more power given to a water and sewer district than there is an improvement district. We will be asking we're in the process of asking an AG opinion whether or not we actually do have jurisdiction. From a personal opinion side, I think Senator Scott is right. If we can come up with a mechanism for dissolution, Section 154 basically indicates, and I think it was a good forethought when the statute was created, or the title was created in particular, that one entity should take over the entire thing. Should it dissolve. There's been a lot of discussion between the water district, between Wardwell and Bar None, and some with Mills about piecemealing this out. it creates a lot of problems on how do you allocate funds. I believe Barnett or Wardwell is trying to do some additional capital improvements within the district, which will lay outside of any of the municipal boundaries. Ideally, it would be best if, in this particular case, Barnett took over the entire system and ultimately let the unincorporated area determine if they wanted to stay as an outside city or outside town customer or form an improvement district on their own. The challenge with the portion that lies within Mills is would have to be some agreement for the loss of customers. Ultimately, I think regional has, through the state, has some power to probably nix anything that goes on unless we can resolve the water customer issue. So with that, I'm glad to take any questions.
Questions for Commissioner Bertolio? Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, so my question is, if the water rate service, the regionals debt, what does this special district use the mill levies for? What is it? I assume that has to go through the commission and get approved. Where's the end game there?
Commissioner, if you know.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Clausen, the mill is used for capital projects, is my understanding in talking with one of their board members. I don't believe they use it to supplement their water rates. They are a quasi municipality, as it's stated in the statute, so they have a lot more power. They can bond, they can take on debt, which a water and sewer district can, but they can do inspections. It's quite a list, and I apologize if I don't remember who actually stated this, but there is a layer from the county perspective of an overlap of regulations when it comes to actual construction projects. Now we have multiple water permits that have to be pulled. All the inspections, there's crossover in the unincorporated area. So there is, from a county perspective, some challenge in trying to make sure we get things moving and getting them done efficiently because of just that added layer of bureaucracy.
Further questions for the commissioner? Seeing none at this time, Commissioner, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to Mr. Lofton, who's joined us. Welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Steve Lofton, president of 71 Construction and Tetro Corporation. 71 Construction does water line and sewer line construction in the area, and Tetro does land development. A lot of our land is held in Wardwell's district and in the town of Mills. I just wanted to provide a perspective on that the Wardwell Water District is not wanting to cooperate with any of the different entities. And me as a developer, they especially seem obstructive and anti-growth. This is probably bad for the two towns that are trying to service their customers well and grow and have community development. The different things I find is that the Wardwell Water District sort of makes up their own rules. We have a subdivision agreement, and they add layers of cost for their own, for no good reason. For instance, we have an engineer in our agreement that we have to hire as a developer. And then on top of that, because I assume that the Wardwell Water District doesn't trust our engineer or something, then they hire their own engineer at an extra expense. We had a water line that our inspector found wasn't deep enough, so it would have to be changed. The Wardwell Water District hired an attorney to talk to us, so we had to talk through an attorney the whole rest of the time we've been doing this subdivision. I've been building the subdivision, well, it's built long ago. It's 4 years now and has not been finished and hasn't started on its warranty for water and sewer because of the non-cooperation of the Wardwell Water and Sewer District. So I hope that gives you an idea of how uncooperative and territorial Wardwell is. They don't want to give up their territory or their kingdom. Any questions?
Questions from Mr. Lofton? Not seeing any, Mr. Lofton. Thank you very much for being with us today and joining us. And appreciate your testimony and thoughts.
Thank you.
Mr. Joyce, you're up next. Welcome to Corporations. If you'd turn on your mic.
Hello. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you very much for accepting testimony on this topic today, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is John Joyce. I'm the director for the Bighorn Regional Water Joint Powers Board, which is a wholesale water distribution, much like Central Regional down there in Casper. We serve the southern end of the Bighorn Basin. We have 11 districts that we serve. We serve the town of Basin, town of Grable, Manderson, Shell, Kirby, and the city of Orland. And we're building a pipeline out to the town of Burlington now to serve them also. We serve the Wyoming Boys School and a couple other individual larger entities. So the topics, the discussion that they've been having is issues that we've dealt with over the years because we have a lot of interface between towns and districts. Most all of our towns and the city of Orland are surrounded by rural water districts. And they cover the gamut. Some of them are service improvement districts, some of them are water districts, and some of them are water and sewer districts. The HB 72 that I was looking at that has been in front of the committee in draft form apparently and been turned down or not moved on. What is my concern? The language in that bill is detrimental to the relationship between districts and towns and cities. All of our districts have loans, some of them with the state through the Water Development Commission, some of them through rural development. Those are part of the monthly water bills that everyone pays. In a few cases, they levy mills also, but most of the expenses are covered in our districts by monthly water bills. So those bills include a pretty large portion, which is debt retirement. If a city or a town in our Joint Powers Board area decided that there was one subdivision or area outside of its boundaries that they thought they could enhance their revenue with a little bit, and they were able to do that without consent from those folks or from that district, that would be a big burden on the district. Some of these districts are very small. They all have volunteer boards. They don't have big budgets, and their water rates are designed around all of the customers that they have. So when they were designed and engineered and built, and as they've gone through time and expanded, all of the debt that they've incurred is included in the monthly water bill, the rates that everyone pays. So if you remove some of those customers, you're going to impact their ability to pay and to operate and maintain their system. And as I said, some of those loans our Water Development Commission loans through the state of Wyoming. So if you made those districts not financially viable, some of that money wouldn't be coming back to the state in the form of loan payments. We operate now and have been ever since I've been involved under the statutes 41-10, 152, 153, 154, and 155. And I think most of what bar none and Mills and Wardwell are dealing with can be addressed in those statutes. As they mentioned, they had gotten 25% of the value of the land in signatures and 25% of their district members and gone to the county commissioners. And at that point, I don't know why it didn't move ahead to a referendum, but certainly could have if they'd pressed that issue. So the idea that we would have another statute that would essentially contradict some of these statutes that are already on the books is concerning. That, of course, increases any kind of legal fees that we'd have if some member of our joint powers board, and I'm speaking for the whole state. I talked with Mark Pepper. He's the director of the Rural Water Association of the state. He couldn't be here today, but he has a big concern also. The setup that we have here at Bighorn Regional and our towns and rural districts is similar to all across the state. And most of those rural districts have been funded by the Water Development Commission. The state has a lot of money into them, and they do a good job providing water service to everyone. So to allow a city or a town to take over part of a district, I just don't think that the unintended consequences there would be something you'd be interested in. I understand they have a serious problem down there, and maybe in the Casper area they need some other type of solution to the problem. But I would really caution everyone about putting in additional statutes that in, at least from my reading, would contradict some of the existing statutes. So at the very least, this example that I see here, the HB 72, hopefully they would rework it before they'd even consider it, so that it's that it would work with the other statutes that we already have to comply with.
So, Mr. Joyce, and you might not have caught the very beginning of the meeting, but this committee did hear the concerns with the way 72 was drafted. And I think we are setting out today to understand the problem, various solutions. But I don't believe it's anyone's intention on the committee to start with House Bill 72 as the starting point. It's really to understand the issue and what can be done, because we did hear the concerns on, effects to other systems and other places around Wyoming with the approach that 72 contemplated. And maybe that is the correct approach long-term. And, there'll be winners and losers, but at least for today, the hope is to understand the issue and then figure out what avenue the committee would like to pursue, if it needs to pursue a statutory avenue, and what that would look like for subsequent meetings. So certainly appreciate your testimony and reiterating that because there's one issue in the middle of the state doesn't mean we should cause issues in other parts of the state. Senator Scott, question.
Mr. Chairman, yes, question with regard to the Bighorn Regional Water and the various districts that y'all serve, leaving aside the municipalities, we can simply look it up. How large is the largest of the rural water districts, the non-municipal water districts that you serve?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have exact population numbers, but we go by taps, and we have two of the districts that are over 400 individual taps. So if you multiplied that by 2.5 people per household, that would give you an idea on the size of the population.
Follow up, Senator Scott.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I'm thinking is we try to solve some of the problems. One of the problems here is the size of the water district involved with Wardwell, and an election method that is much better adapted to a smaller district. And maybe one of the ways to distinguish so that we don't mess up the arrangements with Bighorn, which seems to be working just fine, is to deal in the election section based on the size of district. Then you have to have a more formal election system than they're using. Or something like that, so they're more responsive to local public pressures.
Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Joyce, or that might be an avenue forward in your opinion?
Yes, that's a little bit concerning to me, listening to the testimony. We have statutorily, there's each type of district we has real specific election requirements, and we spend a lot of time meeting those requirements, advertisements, polling places. The results are published in public record, so there may be something that they don't have to follow that we have to follow, but we spend a lot of time, each one of our districts, making sure that we're in compliance on election laws, and they're open and available for everyone to participate in.
Further questions, Representative McGuire?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Joyce, you mentioned statute 4110-152, which I was interested when I read that. And everybody knows that there's the statutes and then there's the case law, and that's the rest of the story is the case law. And interestingly enough, the case that they mentioned there is Miller versus the town of Mills, where the town of Mills annexed property but backed out of, decided not to take the water district at the same time, which was alluded to earlier and sort of set the stage for this problem. My question is, with regard to the statutes that you mentioned and the way that they have been used up to this point, with the exception of central Wyoming, is the system working okay? To your knowledge, the way that the statutes are written, are they working in a manner that's acceptable to every other place?
Mr. Joyce?
Mr. Chairman, as far as I'm aware of, they're working well. Everybody has difference of opinion, and I guess you could say territorial issues. We certainly have them here within our system, and so I don't have all the details of all over the state, but I visit with other managers and directors, and in general, the statutes guide us on how to operate, and that avoids a lot of litigation and legal efforts. Everybody can agree on how to do something. It sounds like it's broken down in this area and around Casper, which is unfortunate, but in general, it saves us from having to be in court all the time. We have a set of statutes. We get an opinion from an attorney or the attorney general on how it should go, and that's what the towns and the districts follow.
Further questions, Mr. Joyce? Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Joyce, thank you very much. I kind of have a question. It might sound a little off base, but in general, how are rates established for regional water systems? Because does this really come down to a rate design issue where part of the area that's served by a regional water system thinks they can do better on rates than they can under the system? And in that case, is there kind of arguments of how subsidies exist across the system and on and on. This committee last year had an issue about water rates with respect to the city of Laramie and the University of Wyoming. And we jumped in there and resolved it in a certain way, but it turned out, really when you look at these things, sometimes it's a subsidy and rate design issue. And I'm just asking, my background is rates, so I'm wondering if that's part of the problem.
Mr. Joyce, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for the question. Rates, of course, is a big issue in our system, and we charge a standard fee throughout the system. So there are some of our entities that feel possibly that they're subsidizing some of the other entities, and we discussed that at board meetings, and we just had a rate change here about 6 months ago that'll go into effect next fiscal year. And that was had some public hearings and discussion, and those are things that we worked out within our board and within the communities. So there may, in some people's opinion, certainly be some subsidization going on a little bit one way or the other, but to have it handled by a city or a town just taking over somebody else, I don't know if that's the best way to go about that. I would hesitate to say that was the best way to solve the problem.
Further questions for Mr. Joyce? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for being here today, John. Certainly appreciated your testimony.
Thank you very much.
All right, committee. I know City Administrator Napier's here. We probably will take a lunch break for an hour and come back is what it's looking like. So we get to tourism districts after lunch. But to be cognizant of your time, since I know you drove down, any testimony you'd like to provide on this topic? I assume you're here for this topic and not for tourism improvement districts. I probably should make sure before I call you up. Would that be correct? You're here for water sewer?
You would be correct,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I appreciate your audience today and taking up this issue and having these questions and discussion. I'm not sure that I need to repeat a lot of what's already been said by my colleagues from Natrona County. But without a doubt, the issue that Casper has been kind of keeping an eye on, if you will, throughout this debate is with regard to growth boundaries. The cities and towns and the county have done a lot of work as it relates to establishing commonly held growth boundaries in the area there. And without a doubt, with the legislation that has come forward in the past, our concern was with regard to maintaining relevance with respect to activity that takes place within our growth boundary. So that indeed, if those utilities are taken over or there is a transition or whatever, the city of Casper maintains its ability to be able to do work on utilities when it has the ability to do so or the inclination to do so or the political motivation, whatever that might be. And so when these kinds of transactions or discussions take place and it's within the city of Casper growth boundary, we're concerned that we can do what we need to do when the time is right for the city and its opportunities that they don't want to lose with regard to respective growth boundaries. And so for us, that's a really critical issue. If I may continue, Mr. Chairman, I'm also the vice president for the WAM organization as well. And one of the elements that I have been talking to with my colleagues in that organization is to keep an eye on this discussion, because this is not just a central Wyoming issue. This is an issue that will bear itself in other parts of the state. And I'll continue to advocate in that regard, because I do believe that even though we are seeing a lot of issues manifest currently in Natrona County, we will see these issues again. And so we're hopeful that with regard to your conversations and deliberations and whatnot, some answers can be brought to bear that will help resolve these matters, not only for what we're experiencing in our area, but where you will likely see this happen again throughout the other parts of the state of Wyoming. Thank you.
Questions for the Casper City Administrator, Representative McGuire?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Napier, has WAM identified any portion of the statute in that they say we need to change this because of a problem in another part of the state, or are they focused on problems in other parts of the state? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, WAM has not taken a position as of this point in time, this level of deliberation, if you will, with regard to a formal position in this matter. And I would also say that there do not appear to be any other interface issues of this nature and magnitude that we're experiencing in Natrona County, to my knowledge, Representative, if that answers your question.
Good. Further questions, Mr. Napier? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for being here and
Thank you.
driving down.
Thank you very much.
Committee, I'm probably going to take an hour lunch break, but is there anyone here who cannot testify on this subject after lunch? I know some of us do have a long drive. But if everybody else can be back by 1:15, let's take an hour and 15-minute lunch break and we'll reconvene at 1:15. And if a couple of you do need to get on the road, just let me know and we can find alternative means to Zoom in, et cetera, this afternoon. And just so the members of the public know, we have been discussing the issue up here over email about taking the lunch break. So thank you for your indulgence, members of the audience and people online. We'll be recessed until 1:15.